What I do remember is the fire just exploding.
August 19th, 2015, the start of the Twisp Fire in Okanogan County. Wind shifts so quickly, in just 15 minutes, it doubles in size. 25-year-old firefighter Daniel Lyon and 3 others trapped, blinded by smoke. Their engine runs off the road, and Daniel must run through the fire. And are there flames all around you at this point?
Yeah, I mean, just fully engulfed in flames. And for probably 50% of the run getting out of there.
He got out, most of them.
As some of them said, my skin was like dripping off of me.
The burns were torturous, and surviving was just the start.
I do remember having a conversation with God saying, if I don't wake up tomorrow, I'll be fine with that.
But God had other plans, including the mistake that saved his life.
It changed everything going forward in that moment.
Success is messy, and this is what it looks like. Hit and miss is about really successful people and their mistakes. You have to keep taking your best shot again and again, and it is going to be hit and miss. Hey everybody, so glad you are here for this amazing success story and some hit and miss. I'm Monique Ming Laven. Now, being a broadcast journalist means reporting on devastating tragedies daily, often hourly, and sometimes by the minute. But then you have a tragedy and a success story like Daniel Lyon. We've got to go back to the summer of 2015. The Twisp Fire was one of 5 raging in Washington. They roared through 520,000 acres. More than 1,300 firefighters answered the call, and Daniel was one of the earliest. He was in engine number 642 along with 3 other men, but Daniel was the only one who lived to tell what happened. His story is so filled with struggle and pain. The triumph is baffling, and so is his absolute joy. But first, he had to come out of a coma. Did you wake up out of your coma with memory of what happened?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember everything up until the point that I was in the ambulance and they basically put me out.
Wow.
And then that's where it all went black. And then I woke up about exactly a month later.
Can we go there about what you remember?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
What I do remember is the fire just exploding and us trying to get out of there as quickly as possible. Our engine ended up crashing and I had to take off on foot from there. And that's how I got burned so badly. So I ran through quite a bit of the fire to get back to our safety zone.
Wow. So your engine crashed and that was in the fire, is that correct?
That's correct, yep.
How far did you have to run?
I remember having to crawl, literally up probably a 45-degree embankment. That's why my hands got such in bad shape. They had to amputate those fingers because I was literally clawing up this hillside that was, on fire.
Fire burned his fingers and smoke blinded his eyes. He got to the top of the embankment, but not to the end of the flames. He had to run. How far, he's not certain, just that there were switchbacks. And are there flames all around you at this point?
Yeah, so it was, just fully engulfed in flames for probably 50% of the run getting out of there. And then finally, I got to a point where I literally just broke out of the flame. There wasn't smoke, or there wasn't a lot of smoke, and there wasn't the flame. It was just like a wall. And I looked back, hoping those guys were right on my heels behind me, but they weren't. And then I got down to the bottom of the hillside, crossed the pavement to the other side of the road, and looked back, and it was just everything was on fire. So once I broke out of that fire, I was able to luckily immediately get some medical help.
He couldn't find the other men in his engine. No one would ever see them again. But other crews rushed to him. They gave him both help and also an ominous warning.
I remember there was a fire engine that was parked close by, and I went to go run up to the mirror to see what my face looked like. And one of the other firefighters immediately grabbed my arm and said, "You can't do that. Don't do that right now." And that's when it hit me that this is really bad.
He did look down at his hands.
If I remember correctly, they were like white. They were like a bleached white. They weren't like a blackened like you'd think of somebody just running through a fire. But when he said, "You can't look at your face," that really freaked me out. And then I remember it was about 90-something degrees that day, really hot out. And I just ran through fire and I started getting really cold. And I knew shock was starting to set in. And so things started going through my head of, I can't say that death crossed my mind, but the fear of, definitely a fear of what's my life going to be here in the next few days.
Did you think you were going to make it?
I, mm, I knew it was bad because, as some of them said, my skin was like dripping off of me at this point. And a lot of people ask, well, how do you get burned so bad when you're wearing all that fire gear? But what a lot of people don't realize is when you're a wildland firefighter, you're wearing a fairly thin layer of Nomex. I was put on that ambulance, and I was probably in that ambulance for 5, 10 minutes in just brutal agony, just begging for them to give me any kind of painkiller they could. And they were. And I remember I asked them to pray for me, and they did. I think there was 3 of them in that medic unit, and then they said this will hopefully help, and then it all kind of went to sleep from there.
So you're in incredible pain in the ambulance, and you do eventually lose consciousness. And then the next time that you regained consciousness, was that a month later?
Yes, it was more like coming slowly over the next week or two, slowly coming back to life, and then I'd say 2 weeks later is when I really started comprehending what was going on, the situation that I was in, hearing about what happened.
All 3 men in his fire engine had died: Richard Wheeler, Tom Bashevsky, and Andrew Zajac. And the flames continued advancing the entire time Daniel was in a coma. 520,000 acres burned, about 200 homes lost. Daniel learned this as he was filled with pain, covered in bandages.
So just a huge amount to grasp. And then you look down, or I look down at my own body, and I couldn't see most of it, or really any of it, because I was essentially a mummy at this point. I'm just completely bandaged up. But you're just wondering what the heck is under those bandages. And then you get to a point where they do one of your first dressing changes, where you realize you're actually awake enough to realize what's going on, and just you kind of feel like your world just got destroyed right then.
Well, and you're talking about the sight of it, but you must have been in incredible pain too.
Yeah, I do remember being in extreme amount of pain. It's interesting because the drugs that they're able to give you, thankfully, are able to help cut the pain, but they don't eliminate it, that's for sure. They would load you up and on as much painkillers as they could, high octane painkillers, and it helped, but it took the edge off. That's it.
Wow.
The best way I can describe it is you're having a migraine and you take a single Tylenol and it helps, but it definitely doesn't eliminate it.
Wow. Did they, like that first firefighter that you came across when you ran for your life, did the people in the hospital tell you, wait before you look?
I do remember just that first time seeing, I think the first thing that I saw was my hands, if I remember correctly, because my tips, or I guess the lack of my fingertips, the first part of the amputation was sticking out of the gauze, and that was the first part that I had seen, and that was pretty scary. I mean, that's horrific. And so you can only imagine, I'm thinking in that moment, what the rest of my body must look like. Are they going to have to amputate more things down the road? Is this as bad as it's going to get? Is it going to get worse? A whirlwind of thoughts are going through your mind.
So you started by just seeing your fingertip. When did you look at you were burned over 70% of your body, is that correct?
Yeah, just about 65 to 70% of my body is burned up. Yep.
How did you approach looking at yourself? How did you decide when you were going to do it?
Everything was a mess. Being that 65 to 70% of your body is one giant open wound at this point. They'll graft something on you, and then things start to turn colors you've never seen before, and it's probably the most graphic injury that you could deal with. So I was just forced to see my arms and my legs when they would take the bandages off, and I feel like back then it was what it was. But the first time I saw my face in the mirror, that's when I broke down, because my face got so badly burned, and seeing it completely unwrapped, and just the way it was so raw in that moment, I broke down, because I thought I'll never get married. I'll never have any chance of a love life. I remember, and that was the absolute hardest part of that right there. Was the thought of my future being just gone.
Who could love this face, he thought. He was just 25 years old. Meanwhile, his family had released a picture of him to the media, taken shortly after he trained to become a wildland firefighter. He has a handsome, expressive face, wearing a Methow Valley fire hat, an untested yellow Nomex shirt, his fully intact finger pointing to smoke from a fire in the mountains far away. He's smiling, excited to meet his new calling. He would never look like that again. Misery loves company, and he had a lot of it in the burn unit. I mean, surviving the original incredible wounds was just the beginning of it. How did you approach recovery? How did you get from, getting new dressings every day? How did you deal with that on a day-to-day basis?
The doctors always wanted you to walk each night and each day whenever you could. At a certain point during your recovery, they want you to start walking. So I would just walk the unit floor. And by doing that, you're doing laps up there and you meet other burn survivors. And it's an interesting thing walking by somebody who's equally as bandaged up as you are, or maybe slightly less, or even slightly more. And you both kind of stop and you say, "What the heck happened to you?" And obviously we're here for the same reason. We both got burned up, but it's probably for a totally different reason. And getting to meet the people that I did, that gave me hope, and hopefully I gave them hope, and we all helped each other. And that is really what got me through a lot of that. Just knowing that you weren't alone.
You are clearly a positive person and a strong person. Clearly, I mean, I hope never to understand fully the depths of your strength and perseverance. But along the way, did you make any mistakes about how to recuperate, how to get through this?
And it was so painful to walk. But it was crucial. I didn't see it at the time, but the doctors ensured that it was crucial that I walked on my own. And if you're going to fight the scarring, that's one way to do it, is get moving. And I remember I'd walk past several rooms that had electric mobility wheelchairs out in front of their rooms. I mean, it seemed like the hall was 5 miles long. It was probably 100 feet long, and it would take me forever to get down there. But probably after a week or two of walking past those rooms with the wheelchairs in front of them, I remember I snapped at the nurse and I really got upset with her. And I said, "It is absolute garbage that all these folks get to use a wheelchair and I don't." I said, "You're making me walk." I said, "It hurts like heck." I said, "I want a wheelchair if I'm going to be doing this anymore." And I remember her looking at me and said, "Daniel, you got to realize those people only have those wheelchairs in front of the rooms because there's a good chance that they're never going to walk again." She says, "As much as it hurts right now," she says, "their injuries are a lot different than yours." And she says, "As much as it might hurt right now, you're still able to walk. And it might be slow and it might be painful, but you're still doing it with your own two legs." And she said, "Those folks with those chairs might not get that chance again." And that, man, I felt so bad in that moment because the mistake I made was making an assumption, essentially, and telling these nurses who have dedicated their life to helping people like me, and I'm snapping at them because, part of it was just because of the pain that I'm in.
Sure.
It was always a regret that I have, but it was probably the biggest learning lesson in that moment. And it was very early on, and I can pretty much truly say that from that point on, I never made another complaint.
Really?
Yeah.
You would have been allowed, and I'm sure they even forgave you in the moment for any temper that you lost.
Right. That was obviously a huge mistake, and in that moment I feel bad for it. But the perspective that it gave me and the lesson that it taught me, that became a mistake that I think I've put a positive spin on it, and it really helped me. It changed everything going forward in that moment. I hope that to this day that nurse forgives me.
That haul may have felt 5 miles long, but the journey was just getting started. He was in the hospital for 3 months, excruciating rehab, skin grafts, surgery after surgery that continued long after release, more than 100 of them. It was grinding, pushing the limits of what anyone could survive, physically, mentally, emotionally. Did you experience any anger?
Oh yeah. Yep. That was probably my only emotion I had. I cried all the tears that I could have. I felt like there was nothing more to cry. And I feel like anger is it was the wrong way for me to cope with it, but it simply is what it is.
Did you not want to talk about it for a while?
I'd be coming almost directly out of wound care and where I'm just in excruciating pain and relieving therapy at Harborview. And I'd have to go to a meeting room in the hospital and meet with some investigator that I've never met before in my life and tell him every nitty gritty detail. And that it was so fresh and so dark in that time, it just made me clam up and not want to talk at all.
And so for a while you just said, I'm done with this.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh. When you say the darkest part, what was the darkest part?
Darkest part was leaving the hospital, believe it or not. And I remember early on I wanted to get out of the hospital as bad as I could, but then by that second month you start getting used to it, even though it's almost like what I imagine like being in a prison. You're just trapped in this place and you can't go outside.
After hundreds of hours of therapy, countless surgeries, countless times of walking this hall, I'm finally doing it for the last time.
But then I finally got released and got to go home. And home for me was then going to be Montana, which is where my parents lived. And I had to move back in with them.
August 19th, that was definitely the scariest day of my life.
And that became a different kind of prison. He is the first to credit his parents, their incredible love and devotion, with getting him through. But he was 25. He was naturally adventurous, self-reliant. He never intended to be living with them again, dependent. And every night he'd have to become a mummy again. Not wrapped in gauze this time, but encased in hard plastic on his arms, his face, his knees, splints to prevent his tissue from hardening.
And so you can't move, you're completely stiff. And so you had to sleep with those on throughout the night. And I remember laying on my back one night, just wearing those splints, staring up at the ceiling at my parents' house, thinking, this is absolute hell. This is never how I pictured my life. This is not what I want for my life. And I can honestly say I've never, ever contemplated suicide. But in that moment, I do remember having a conversation with God saying, if I don't wake up tomorrow, I'll be fine with that. I won't take my own life. But if powers of above don't have me waking up tomorrow, I will be fine with that.
You were kind of asking him if he would.
Sure. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was definitely the lowest, darkest point of my life.
But maybe it was God that reminded him of those motorized wheelchairs in the burn unit, the ones Daniel so badly wanted to use but was lucky not to need. He already knew misery loves company, but he soon learned healing does too.
The only thing that got rid of the anger was finally starting to do things like motivational speaking and speaking to other burn survivors and firefighters and law enforcement officers about my experiences. I know a lot of guys and gals, they keep it cooped up inside. And for a long while I did. And that's what I think led to a lot of the anger. When I could start having the opportunity to speak to other burn survivors of how to get through this, that's when I was really starting it kind of snowballed and started getting better quicker.
Quick is a relative term.
My goals never went away. I always had the same goals before the fire as I did after the fire. But the timeline for them drastically changed. I'd usually have a surgery once every 3 months to either fix my hands or do another graft or some plastic surgery. And you'd go in for a surgery, and what they did the surgery on becomes infected and it has to be redone. Or they do the surgery and it scars so bad that you now have to have lasering done to it. And so a lot of times it was like 2 steps forward and then 2 steps back. You felt like you're right back to where you were.
You said that your goals are the same now as they were before the fire.
For example, I always wanted to climb Mount Rainier all my life. Growing up in Puyallup, always saw it out my window. And so I made sure that was one of the first goals I accomplished.
That's amazing.
ended up summoning Rainier, and so I got to check that off the list. Then from before I ever started firefighting, I wanted to be a police officer. Went back through the academy and went back to being a police officer for a while.
Too hot for a burn, dude, to be out here running.
Getting back to running, getting back to enjoying all the things that I used to do, kayaking, and like what I'm doing now, traveling. There was a point I couldn't even drive a car, and now I drive our RV all over the country. So it's little things like that where those goals never changed. They just took a lot longer to get to the point where I achieved them.
And you were talking earlier about your belief and your fear that you would never be able to fall in love and get married.
Yep.
And look at you now.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
Megan is her name. He thought no one would ever love him, and she proved him wrong.
Even after all he's been through, he still always has a smile on his face, and he's just super strong.
They had been on a couple dates before the fire, but they really fell in love during his recovery, and they were married this summer. Fantastic. Can you tell me your engagement story?
So, well, I couldn't make it a easy engagement for her, of course, so I had to drag her to the top of a mountain and propose at the highest peak in Hell's Canyon. For many of our summers, we spent in Hell's Canyon on the Oregon-Idaho border. It was a place we always loved and just a great place to relax. So literally, we got in a raft, we rowed across Brownlee Reservoir and spent probably about 4 or 5 hours hiking, and finally got to the top of that peak and proposed up top, and it was one of the coolest days of my life.
Quite a peak, but there are still valleys. There always will be. It shifts with the amount of activity he does. His injuries mean more muscle soreness, and arthritis will become a factor. And the exercise he loves keeps his skin more elastic, but it also causes stretching that hurts. Two sides to the coin, and each day is a new flip. But he's at peace with chance. Talking about being a risk taker, and you were your whole life before that, did you ever feel like you took it too far?
I don't know. I don't think so, because all life involves risk, and obviously some things take a lot more risk than others. Well, jobs like the military, police, fire, those are all jobs that we need. They're what keeps the world running. It keeps the world safe and helping other people. There's no reason that somebody else should have to do that job and take on that risk and not myself. And so in a heartbeat, I'd do it all over again.
Everything that you say makes sense, and it's brave. Did it take you something to get to that point?
I'm just blown away by the beauty of the things I get to see now. And that is because of the expanded perspective that I've had now, realizing how short life is and really understanding how I want to live it and how to appreciate every moment. And I hopefully have decades left in front of me to go. But at 25, I got to learn that perspective that most people don't learn till it's too late. I am so grateful for that. And I get to live a life where I'm truly, truly high on life every single day.
After Daniel escaped the flames 9 years ago, another firefighter blocked him from a mirror, mercifully delaying his truth. But now Daniel can look it in the face, and it is beautiful. When you look at yourself in the mirror now, what do you see?
I see a person that has a heck of a lot of stories to tell and has really stories written all over them. People have asked me a lot of times, would you ever get tattoos? And I'd say, yeah, my arms are covered in tattoos. These are tattoos that were, given to me by just life. And so when I look in the mirror, I think of somebody that has a lot of stories to share, and making it my goal to help share some of those stories, because I do think, or at least I hope, that some of my outlooks will help somebody else. I appreciate you giving me a platform to share the story and ask some great questions, and it was a joy talking with you.
Believe me, the joy was all mine. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching Hit and Miss. You can find me, Monique Ming Laven, on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Links are all on KIRO7.com/hitandmiss. And next time on Hit and Miss.
Hey, everyone, it's Kenji.
Kenji Lopez Alt. Almost 2 million people subscribe to his YouTube cooking show. Another 700,000 watch his Instagram food reviews.
We're gonna get some butter in the pan.
He is no flash in the pan. He's sold more than 1 million copies of his first cookbook and won 2 James Beard Awards. But no one else follows his recipe for success. Yours is the first story I've heard where you become this giant in the food world. And it started off with an architecture degree from MIT. And the odd decisions don't stop there. Just take the Kenji tale of some pasta, a plunger, and one terrible mistake.
And then he's just like staring at me in horror. And then and that's when I realized, oh, what did I just do?
The Curious Case of Kenji Lopez Alt. That is the next Hit and Miss.